we are all seeing that AI is not going anywhere. It's going to be fundamentally with us. So that's when I'm starting to see that kind of strategic thinking. So I'll give you an example. I think we're not very far from a future in which your org chart will be composed of humans and agents. And that will determine not only the tasks that you give to humans, the tasks that you give to agents, but almost your talent attraction and retention mechanism. And that can actually be a really good thing, because if we think about most people's jobs, 20-30% of their jobs is repetitive. Probably a machine can do it. And that's a good thing. But I'm starting to see that kind of trying to guess where the future is going to be 2 years from now, 1 year from now, and then retro engineer what we should be doing there today to be in that future faster.
Marco, it's really great to have you. I've been following you and your thought leadership on LinkedIn for a while, and I've been really meaning to connect and learn from you. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Vince. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite amazing how as the AI sort of wave started to come together, you've really provided a lot of guidance and thoughts to the business world on how to navigate that. And in particular, you're really working with the executive team on navigating the AI. So I would love to dive into it if you're good.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess maybe the first thing I would love to ask is, what do you find as some of the most common misconceptions that executives have about AI when you start engaging with them?
I think the first thing is that AI is something that you outsource or belongs to someone else. Belongs onto the IT department or the commercial department. It's not. I think AI is really changing fundamentally how we go to market, how we work internally. So that's the first thing. The second thing is also that it's something very complicated that is technical. And I don't think it is. I'm not a technical guy. And I dove into AI because I think the way you use it changes how you think about it and how you understand it. So they tend to think something very complicated, but especially what happened with AI in the last 2.5 years since ChatGPT came on is you kind of created a consumer interface. I talk about generative AI as AI you can talk to in a very simple way. Whereas traditional AI is your Netflix recommendation engine or your Amazon recommendation. So I think those are the two things that they have as misconceptions. And when we have these misconceptions, we either try to ignore it or fear it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed was that actually the uptake and use of AI is often faster on the more like junior employee level. And a lot of executives don't like naturally start actively using AI, and only some of the front running more like, I guess, early adopter executives are using it. What is your sense now? Like, do you start to see a lot of executives naturally uptaking AI, or do you still see a lot of executives say, this is not really useful for me?
I think what's happening is there's more executives taking it. But when people say, oh, executives are not doing their jobs with AI, everything, I always ask the question, but who's teaching them? Who's teaching them? There's people pitching to them, there's people writing content, but who is actually sitting with them and showing them what is the technology, how they can use it, and how, most importantly, will change the value chain of what they do. So I think there's also a point of they want it. Some of them are craving for that, but they can't find one place or one resource which they can learn that. And at the same time, they're being asked to think about the future, in a future that's going to change in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but they still need to deliver a quarter for most of these companies. And that's what they tell me in confidence is, I just don't have time. I can't keep up with everything. So I think there's also a point at which we also need to realize that we also have a role to play in that and helping them upskill, because it's also in our interest that leaders understand the technology, and that unlocks more capability, and capability unlocks understanding.
Yeah. And of course, it seems like you've been really supporting executives at different places on this journey of becoming an adopter of AI and actually starting to figure out how to apply to their own work and in their organization. What are typical aha moments that take an executive from skepticism to champion of AI?
I think there's two aha moments. The first one, I'll tell you a story. I as part of a workshop, I did a prompt. So I did the most simple prompt, which is let's create a job description for an HR manager. This was the prompt for everyone. Then I went to the chief legal counsel, and I noticed she was putting a slightly different prompt. And I asked, "What are you doing?" And she said, "You know, Marco, I have been procrastinating on a job description for a legal counsel for the last 2 weeks. I just did it in 17 seconds." So she realized in that moment that is something that's not a far off technology that can help. That's the first one. They realize is, as I said, AI they can talk to and help on something very useful. The second one is when you realize that what they are seeing has a connection with their job and how they're going to work. So for instance, I had another story of someone that I was just showing a video on from Midjourney, for instance. So how do you go from Midjourney? I used then a video model. I don't remember if it was Kling or something like that. And I created a video. The point is not that you can create a fancy video. The point is if you work in marketing, the time and the cost that goes from idea to product to campaign, it will be much shorter, right? So that changes in your value chain. And they started immediately realizing, wow, but that means that I can go much faster to market. Those are normally the two moments that I see.
Interesting. So it seems like the first one is an aha moment related to their own productivity.
Yes.
And then the second one is an aha moment when it comes to their function and the teams they're leading and how it could actually change like the efficiency and the effectiveness of their teams. One of the things, so the former definitely resonates with me because I myself have, once I actually had a killer use case, I became a real fan and I'm like, experimenting much more. Maybe on the second piece first, one of the things I hear a lot actually as a narrative, and I'm curious if you agree with this, is the fact that productivity unlock is easier at an individual level, but a lot of organizations are struggling to turn it into actually a bottom line impact because it's really hard to aggregate individual productivity benefit into an organizational level sort of thing that shows up on your P&L. And that requires like much more strategic thinking around like how do I reshape my function and the workflow and stuff. Are you starting to see a lot of executives approach AI enablement in that sort of strategic way?
I think it's stages. If you understand the productivity part, you understand the technology. If you understand the technology, you start understanding what does it mean. So an example, when you and I started using Microsoft Office or Excel 20 or 25 years ago, we would take an Excel attachment and send it by email, right? Now you're laughing because it seems crazy that we were managing versioning like that.
Yeah.
Only when we understood that did we put an Excel in the cloud and we started doing collaborative work. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think right now the technology is sufficiently established that we are all seeing that AI is not going anywhere. It's going to be fundamentally with us. So that's when I'm starting to see that kind of strategic thinking. So I'll give you an example. I think we're not very far from a future in which your org chart will be composed of humans and agents. And that will determine not only the tasks that you give to humans, the tasks that you give to agents, but almost your talent attraction and retention mechanism. And that can actually be a really good thing because if we think about most people's jobs, 20-30% of their jobs is repetitive. And by repetitive means that probably a machine can do it. And that's a good thing. But I'm starting to see that kind of trying to guess where the future is going to be 2 years from now, 1 year from now, and then retro engineer what we should be doing there today to be in that future faster.
That's so fascinating. Do you have an example of when you think about where we're going to be in 2 to 3 years and how are you going to re-engineer it without giving anything confidential or anything like that? Do you have any concrete examples of how a team or an organization is approaching that?
So there's not a lot of literature because especially around agents and everything is relatively new. A lot of us don't even know, we don't even know the far-reaching consequences of agents. I don't think there's an example that I can say off the cuff. What I'm starting to see is people in certain specific areas starting to think about that. So I'll give an example. There's companies, for instance, in healthcare that have a very important part on healthcare is content reviews, for instance. There's people that already have jobs created in companies which are AI legal content reviewer, as an example. So they're starting to think about that. How can you get the human in the machine? How to work on that? I'm not seeing yet a company that has completely figured that out. And I think if a company says they figured that out, it's most likely wrong because there's a lot of what the companies do. I see, and this is not only with AI, we throw technology at broken processes. And guess what? The processes break, but they break faster. I think you need to reimagine the processes from a light of this new technology. And that's when you actually start making an impact.
Yeah. I that resonates with me. Definitely. Even, we are a startup, but even us, there are some processes that we're rethinking. But, rewiring processes and the way of working is pretty complex, right? Because we're all used to a certain way of doing, and we have a lot of assumptions built into how we do. And so I could only imagine an organization with hundreds and thousands of people having to rewire that process. That change management feels quite difficult.
Yes.
Going back to the executives a little bit, I'm curious what you're seeing as the most effective way to get people to their first aha, whether it be through coaching or courses or just peer work, or do you have any strategies that make it easier for someone to learn?
I used to say, get a room. You really need to get people in a room. When I say a room, it can be online, can be in person, but I have seen the biggest change in just a few hours, 2-3 hours. And what you need to do is first show them practical examples. That's what we're missing in AI. That are relevant for you, Vince, that are relevant for a CMO, that are relevant for a marketing manager, that are relevant for a finance director. How this is going to change how they work. And then get laptops in front of them and get them to experience the technology. And after that, because there will always be that, don't be afraid of introducing the elephant in the room, which is also the bad things that this technology has. I always talk about hallucination. It's true, large language models hallucinate. They're only 95%, well, depends, 95%, 90% accurate. I am not 90% accurate. But the conjunction of me working with an LLM is probably going to be the best outcome. So there's always a side to these things that you need to show, yes, there's good and there's bad. That comes with the technology. And then very quickly move them from this idea that is something that they fear to something that they can actually use for them, that they can manage the good, the bad, and the ugly, but they also can apply it the day after. In the most little things, I do things with people. I show them that they can get an homework, create homework with their kids. They can create an interactive quiz with ChatGPT to do that. They can create an inspirational speech for their wedding to make them sound like Obama. They can go and create a job description, which I always ask, who here likes a job description, likes to create a job? And no one, right? So you make it very practical. Some people say, oh, it's too basic. But I think that's what we need. I have no problem not reaching 20% of people that read my stuff, because I think what we need is to bring those 80% of people along.
Yeah. So the sort of the early adopters, people are reading ahead and stuff, they will figure the things out and learn how to use it. But there's a ton of research that says it's actually creating kind of an inequality in outcome, because people are
Yes.
adopting AI as being like way more productive. And this is pretty important to bring the whole population along.
And it's always like this technology, there's also always fans at the beginning, and those people are important. What I always say to the people that know a lot about AI is just, if you know a lot about AI, make it simple and bring others along. Literally no one benefits right now from people being some extremely advanced and some people that don't understand it. It's no benefit from that, because we're just creating a divide that's not going to help any of us.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your experience, are there specific skills or characteristics or traits that differentiate executives who are really succeeding with AI versus not?
It's just down to one, is curiosity. I have an example of a story of, I met an executive, I think it was in March 2023. It was just at the beginning, not even, it was probably January 2023, just out of ChatGPT. And we went to have this typical get to know you meeting. We started talking for 5 minutes. And then she asked me, so what have you been up to? And I said, I've been exploring this thing, ChatGPT. And she asked, what is that? And I said, what if I show you instead of tell you? So she walked all the way to my desk. We got my laptop and we spent the rest of the meeting just putting questions into ChatGPT. And she didn't believe me. I said, ask me anything. She's like, okay, put the information about this product. What does this product do? And I put it on and she immediately went, oh, you must be kidding. I'm not. I literally don't know anything about this. And what followed is the important thing. She was a very senior executive. She could have just said, okay, this is fun, but it's not important. She spent the next 3-4 days doing podcasts, listening to podcasts, reading research, getting so interested on it. She asked me to go to her leadership team, which is the first time I ever went to a leadership team in Novartis to do a presentation about what I do nowadays. So it's curiosity. She could have chosen not to be curious. And the reality is, with what's happening with AI, is the cost of knowledge is going down to zero. So we just need to be, one, curious, and second, resourceful to go and get the tools. Because knowledge, really, which is the basis of what you and I grew up with, is we are subject matter experts on something that's going to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah. But on that topic, are you starting to have discussions with executives on, well, what does it mean for our workforce and for me as an executive?
Yes. So one of the things they tend to have in more close discussions, I do sessions called Ask Me Anything, which is exactly that. What does that mean? Will I have a job? And what I always say to them, yes, you will have a job. Most likely it won't be the job that you have now. Because there's parts of your job that won't make sense anymore. And the reality is we can either do, I always give this example. Email is dead. For how many years have you heard that email is dead? Yeah. Ebooks are going to kill paper books. Are you still reading paper books, Vince? Probably are. Stores, e-commerce, let's see. E-commerce is going to kill stores. Has never happened. So things transform, and I think it's going to be the same. Jobs will transform. The sooner we get into this motion that they're going to transform, there's going to be new jobs, let's figure it out and reskill for those jobs instead of being afraid of losing our jobs. That's what I tell them. So yes, I understand. That's why normally my approach is I take them to the 5 stages of grief with AI. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Because the sooner you move to acceptance that this is a reality and it's not going anywhere, the more you're going to be helping your teams and you're going to be helping yourself.
Do you have a sense for and none of us know really, right? But do you have a sense for what will be the critical capabilities that executives still need to have? Like, how will their role change?
It's funny that we've been mostly using, which seems sometimes a derogatory expression, which is soft skills. And I think soft skills are really the new hard skills. In a world where the knowledge itself is accessible, what's going to make us stand out is how do we lead people? How do we create a compelling vision? How do we tell stories? How do we manage through change? Those are the things that as executives, more than ever, we will need to have. Because what is technical is simply not needed anymore. You will either have an agent do it, or you will help some form of AI assistive technology helping you do it. But those things, learning how to tell stories, how to create a personal or professional brand, how to lead people, how to bring them along, how to attract and retain the best talent, those are the things that I tell them that's not going to go away. That's something you should be doubling down on.
Yeah, that resonates to me. The thing that I also think a lot about is you have all the different superpowers with technology, but work gets done as a team, as an organization, and with a group of people. And we're still social beings. I don't think people want to be in a world where like everybody's just on their own, like being productive. Like that's not an enjoyable world. Like people still want to be together, like accomplishing things together.
Yes.
So I'm very curious myself. How does world evolve when individuals become so powerful and productive?
Yes, that's
on
true.
Their own? What does that mean in terms of team? Do we still want to be in a team? Will we naturally be drawn to be in a team? Like, I'm just very curious how that's going to play out.
I also don't have the answer, Vince. I think there's a risk of social withdrawal.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I have everything. I don't need anything. I have an agent that can do this for me, or I have ChatGPT that can help me with this, or I have Canva. I don't need anyone. So there's a risk of social withdrawal. Even if you take it to a further extent, if you think about character AI and things like that, you can actually create friends that feel like friends, and you don't need real friends anymore. Yeah. Right. So that's that risk. For me, we are being given the option as humanity to spend less time in things that are repetitive or don't matter as much, to focus on human connection. We are being given that power. Now, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to work 4 hours a day and spend the rest of the time either with our family or our friends or hobbies or our health and wellness? Or are we going to work 12 hours a day because we want to make way more money? I don't know what we're going to choose as humans, but that choice and that power is being given to us.
As you embrace AI yourself, have you learned anything about yourself that you found surprising?
It's interesting. There's actually a prompt you can put on ChatGPT without putting your name. Yeah. Just say, tell me everything that you know about myself.
Based on like all the interactions you've had with me, kind of thing.
So don't put your name, just put tell me everything that you know about myself, and then follow with this prompt. Tell me something about myself that I might not be aware of. Yeah. And then third, recommend me resources or books or videos to watch based on that area that I've not be aware. What I learned with AI, which is quite interesting, is that my muscle now, my default, I developed this muscle. My default is to use AI for something. And I didn't have that at the beginning. Right now, I think I'm about to do something which is either energy intensive or work intensive or time intensive. And I learned that it's way more my ability to ask the right questions rather than have the right answers. And that's a fundamental shift. And I was doing something the other day I was looking for a bag, a Samsonite bag. And I'm a bit of an OCD, so I had the bag A on the left and bag A on the right. And I was comparing the weight, the size, the price, everything. I put in everything on ChatGPT and asked, can create a side-by-side comparison of these two bags. And it did it in a few seconds. So I'm realizing that right now, that's not the way I was brought up. The way I was brought up, my education was I memorize something, I tell the right answer, and I'm rewarded. What I think AI is making me change is I need to be way smarter, way more creative, way more insightful about the question that I have. And that's a fundamental change that I think we're all going to go through.
That's really interesting. I would add on to that. And for me, I think the thing that I started to have this muscle too, as well, from your point on, anytime I have to create an output, like I find myself, I use Claude more. But the thing that I see my brain always exercising is asking it, is this good enough? Like, what is actually excellent? And I'm basically trying to apply my own judgment to say, no, this is not good enough. Like, can we make it this? Or like, I want you to go this way. So it's almost like setting the vision.
Yes.
And I might not know how to get to what's great, but I know what great looks like.
Yes.
And I will like keep on prompting and refining until the thing creates what I think is great. And so there's a difference of like, I don't need to know how to do something, but I need to be able to tell the difference between mediocre, good, and great.
And that's a challenge that I don't have an answer for, because a lot of people say, you and I have been working for a few years. We have the wisdom that comes with the experience. A lot of people ask me, how are people that are now joining the workforce, for instance, know what it's good or bad? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
How are they going to learn? How does that? I really don't have an answer for that. What I think is good about what you do is sometimes people think about prompting as a one thing, but it's a dialogue. It's really as if you're talking with someone. So make it more like this, make it more like that, take it more this. Oh, this sounds to this or to that. Engaging in that kind of conversation is, I always tell people, it's like as if you were talking with someone. It doesn't end with the first output that you get.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Yeah, and that question that you pose that you don't have an answer to is, I've had a number of chats with different leaders for whom that is kind of this elephant in the room. Like it's not a near term issue. Like it doesn't affect us in the next year, but it will certainly play out in the next 5 years, in almost 10 years, where the career and leadership development ladder is kind of really broken. Anyways, what do you think? Maybe this is one of the risks we talked about, but do you see any other really major risks that executives need to think about?
I mean, it really depends on the industry, but I think we are dealing with pretty powerful technology, and a lot of these things, regulation itself won't be enough from countries. So you need to have these executives in these companies creating some form of self-regulation. So I'll give you an example. One of the things I'm most worried with AI is deepfakes. The technology is incredible. It's so powerful. And right now we don't have any way to differentiate what is real and what is not. And this is only going to get faster and harder to do. So we need to have either put pressure on tech companies or on governments, or have our own guardrails to make sure within our sphere of influence, those things don't happen or are less likely to happen or are punished when they happen. That's one of the biggest concerns I have with AI.
Do you see any companies doing a very good job with this yet?
I think there's companies that what they're doing is, and I think is always a difficult balance. I see companies on one extreme that are doing something that's totally wrong, which is banning AI. There's this story, Ethan Mollick, I think, talked about it. There was someone that was tasked to create a policy to ban ChatGPT at work. Yeah. You know what they used to create the policy? ChatGPT, right? So this is what you shouldn't do because you're hurting your company. On the other hand, there's companies that are going so fast and so furious that they disregard guardrails. Yeah. So somewhere in the middle, what you need to do as a company is to have your governance in place to make sure there are certain guardrails, but at the same time, you don't scare people out of using the tools and making it work for them. So it's a balance, but if you strike that balance, the companies that have done that the best, they are actually the ones that are now taking off because they are striking that balance in the right way.
Speaking of companies that sort of seem to be getting it right, any examples of companies that have been really successful at elevating their executive cohort on becoming sort of AI ready?
One of the examples that's very talked about is Moderna. Where they did was the first thing that they did before anything else, they created something called an AI Academy. This is a public information. They have an open AI case study. And they started to train everyone from the top executives to middle managers to the rest of their teams. And I think they did the right thing because normally what I say, there's 4 stages to all of this. Is first educate people, then create use cases, then find the metrics. And the metrics is not only lagging indicators, it has to be leading. Adoption is a very important one. And then you establish the governance. It doesn't mean you can't do all of them at the same time. But if you don't start fundamentally with education and literacy, some of the things you and I just discussed, fear, objections, they won't be tackled proactively. And that's just going to slow down everything. And that's what Moderna did brilliantly. And nowadays, they're very well known as a case study in and outside of the industry of healthcare. And I think they did an excellent job at that.
And how did they tackle the education piece? Like, do you know what worked really well from them?
I think what I read, and I saw also a couple of people talking, one of them, Bryce Chalamel, was they systematically went to every function and they showed them the examples of how that would apply, for instance, to the legal function. Out of that, they did a bit of a competition. They asked people to submit ideas. Instead of being someone in a bit of control tower saying, this is what we're going to do, they got this idea submitted, and out of that, they selected use cases, which then they funded and they created them. And I think that's the cycle that they've done really well and that you should be doing in other companies.
Interesting. This competition idea is really interesting. In general, also making sort of AI adoption more of a social experience that you embark on it together versus everyone learn it on your own and sort of you're then on your own to.
You have a good point on the social experience. I didn't think about that. What I don't think works is just laid back watching videos.
Right.
It's not. It has to be experiential. You need to be able to feel it. You need to be able to learn from peer to peer, and it can't be one-off.
Right.
You can do the best workshop in the world, the best keynote in the world, the best resource, but the day after is what determines the success or not of the capability that you're building.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any, if you had to give one advice to an executive that you meet who's thinking about trying to AI proof their organization, what would that be?
Don't worry too much about reading everything and all the news and all the new technologies and AGI. I always tell there's so much that you can do already with the technologies that's already available. Choose one tool and just max it out. Have it always open in your laptop, and everything that you're about to do, run it by it. As long as if it's obviously not confidential information, or if it is, you need to have your sandbox or your copilot or whatever. But just have it as your sidekick every day, because that's the best way to actually learn about the technology. There's so much, even before we get to AGI or to agents, there's so much that your life at work and personally can improve from using these technologies that you don't need to worry about the next latest sexy thing.
Yeah, well, I, especially as someone who's increasingly really embraced AI, starting initially from, oh, AI creates too many mediocre outputs, now feeling, I mean, the model has gotten much better too, but definitely
Yes.
when you learn how to use it, you learn how to harness the thing and then become real
Yes.
champions of it.
That's
So
true.
that really resonates. Anything as a sort of last question, anything I should have asked that like you would typically talk to other executives about that we didn't quite cover here?
I wrote about something today, which I think is particularly important. Do you remember when we were kids, there was these books of Where's Waldo?
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, especially since the beginning of the year, we are just going at a pace of mass awareness of AI. It's easy for people to get lost. You have DeepSeek, Stargate, the EU announcing this, then first resemblance of really like of operator, first resemblance of agentic really now coming to life. That it's easy for an executive to think, okay, what do I do? Where's Waldo? What do I start? So the three questions I tell them to think about is just stop and think, okay, me and my team, where are we spending most time and money? Yeah. What can we do? And then second, if we were to use some of these tools, what would we be able to do better? And third, do we actually have the education, the knowledge to understand one and two? And that's why I go back into the education. So it's just as simple as that. Don't worry about everything that you read and everything. It's just think for yourself. How can this help you, help your team, and you have the knowledge to do it? Because it's very easy to get lost and very easy to get overwhelmed.
I just love that final sort of framing. The way the way that resonates with me, especially as a sort of a tech founder, startup founder, is focus on the problem. Don't focus so much on the tools and solutions that are coming out. It's actually fundamentally, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yes.
And all these things are just a tool.
Yeah.
But probably getting the right solution is probably less important than getting the right problem. All the solutions are pretty useful. Yes, some tools are better than others. Like some AI models better on some things than others, but it's probably more on the margin versus you solving the right thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I sort of interpret what you said and really resonates.
It's like if you have a bike that is not very structurally sound and you put a battery on it, you're just going to die faster. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what you want.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Marco, this was really insightful. You get to interact with so many executives on this topic, so it was really cool to hear what you're getting from the market. So thanks for sharing today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.